Hello, my name is Elder Price, and I would like to share with you the most amazing book. Hello, my name is Elder Grant. It's a book about America a long, long time ago. It has so many awesome parts, you simply won't believe how much this book can change your life. Hello, my name is Elder Green. I would like to share with you this book of Jesus Christ. Hello, my name is Elder Young. Hello, did you know that Jesus lived here in the USA? You can read all about it now. Hello, in this.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is Voices from the Dust TV for Monday. It's Monday again already. 14th day of July 2014. We welcome you to our show where we share the reason for the hope of this, the reason why they are Christians, and the reason why you should be too. Our message not only explains what distinguishes LDS Christian doctrine from non-LDS Christian doctrine, but also why we declare that the only salvation remaining for the Gentiles is for them to repent, to be baptized, and then this is the way they become identified in the new and everlasting covenant, the same covenant and of Israel, and then are able to worship at the same altar as Israel. We've discussed this in past episodes of Voices from the Dust Radio and TV for almost a year now, and you can access those past episodes from our website, dust.org. Just go there and click on the menu item TV. You can watch the program live on that page, or click on one of the links provided for our YouTube channel, our Google Plus page, or our Facebook page, all entitled Voices from the Dust. On our Facebook page, just click on the link near the top of the page labeled KVFD TV Live to watch today's programs, or scroll down and click the button labeled KVFD Archives to watch past programs. Well, we're happy to have everybody here this morning, and we've got our usual guests, Roy, my brother Roy, and Sam, Elder Samuel Richardson. So, welcome, guys.
Thank you, Doug. Nice to be here. Hello, both Doug and Roy.
Hi, Sam. Hi, Brother Doug.
I told Roy when we greeted before the program started that his voice was loud. Now it's probably too quiet.
Well, can you turn your volume up a little bit, Roy? We can't hear you. No, it doesn't look. His mic is unmuted, but I don't see anything indicating that he's talking.
Hear me? Can you hear me?
Okay, there. Now we're beginning to hear you.
Okay. Okay, is that better?
Yeah, welcome.
Welcome. Hi, Sam. Hi, Brother Doug, Brother Sam.
Yeah, it's always the problem with the feedback that we get if our volume is too high and not able to hear if it's too low. So we got those kind of problems all the time. Anyway, did you have a good weekend?
Yeah, I did. I had I got to go to the doctor today again, down to VA. So I got to leave just before 10 o'clock. So.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, our program may not be as long as it's been this time because I had a hard time figuring out exactly what I was going to say. And for the first time, really, our Whispers Out of the Ground, taken from chapter 6 of the book of Mosiah, is not very long, and there's really not much to talk about it. There's not much that relates to our topic today. we're going to be talking about the book of Abraham, because even though it's a voice out of the dust, it's not the voices that were taken from the early Americans, but it goes clear back in a startling manner to Abraham, and it's been controversial for many reasons for a long time. So we'll be talking about that. But let's go ahead and play our Whispers Out of the Ground, which is taken from chapter 6 of the book of Mosiah.
And now King Benjamin thought it was expedient, after having finished speaking to the people, that he should take the names of all those who had entered into a covenant with God to keep his commandments. And it came to pass that there was not one soul, except it were little children, but who had entered into the covenant, and had taken upon them the name of Christ. And again it came to pass that when King Benjamin had made an end of all these things, and had consecrated his son Mosiah to be a ruler and a king over his people.
Now, I know this is short, but I had finally had the process down, and now I've forgotten it in the new week here, to pull up the text to share before I started playing the video. So I forgot things. Let me pull up the text, and we can see here we've gone through verse 1 and I guess 2, and I think we're on verse 3 here somewhere, but I'll start it again.
And had given him all the charges concerning the kingdom, and also had appointed priests to teach the people, that thereby they might hear and know the commandments of God, and to stir them up in remembrance of the oath which they had made. He dismissed the multitude, and they returned every one according to their families to their own houses. And Mosiah began to reign in his father's stead, and he began to reign in the 30th year of his age, making in the whole about 476 years from the time that Lehi left Jerusalem. And King Benjamin lived 3 years, and he died. And it came to pass that King Mosiah did walk in the ways of the Lord, and did observe his judgments and his statutes, and did keep his commandments in all things whatsoever he commanded him. And King Mosiah did cause his people that they should till the earth, and he also himself did till the earth, that thereby he might not become burdensome to his people, that he might do according to that which his father had done in all things. And there was no contention among all his people for the space of 3 years.
Okay, so short and sweet. We see here at least this one lesson where he's not relying on the largesse of the people and being burdensome to them. That he can fly around in great big jets and to go golfing in various places of the world, and to take vacations, and to check out the schools for his kids, and all the other abuses that we see happening today with the president, and while the nation goes to pot. So that may not be the worst of it, because ancient kings were a lot worse at this than were presidents of the United States. But we've moved closer to that model where they have all of this going on, and at the expense of the public. And of course now they turned over the money to what is known as the Federal Reserve, and they then have gotten worse and worse, and they're now printing money with nothing to back it, and loaning it to the United States and putting that on the back of the people, while they use it to gamble in these derivatives to try to make huge sums of money, which a lot of them have, but a lot of them haven't, and so you see them dying left and right. Some saying that it's suicide, but under very suspicious circumstances. And so our situation is really horrible talk about it in terms among the voices from the dust. We sort of reset here, and we'll see, because at this point the people are righteous in keeping His commandments, and they have a righteous king. But we will soon see that changes among them as well. Well, today we also want to play a clip from the book of Abraham, chapter 3, and we'll see why that's so important. But since we've got more time here, let's go ahead and do that, and we'll be able to see why it's important in the discussion. If we go to Pearl of Great Price and the book of Abraham, we can you can turn to that, or I'll show it here on screen. We go to chapter 3. We'll talk more about the first two chapters as we get going, but I wanted to play chapter 3 here for us, starting with verse 1. We'll play the whole book here. So if I can get this to cooperate with me. So here we go.
And I, Abraham, had the Urim and Thummim, which the Lord my God had given unto me in Ur the Chaldees. And I saw the stars, that they were very great, and that one of them was nearest unto the throne of God. And there were many great ones, which were near unto it. And the Lord said unto me, These are the governing ones, and the name of the great one is Kolob, because it is near unto me, for I am the Lord thy God. I have set this one to govern all those belong to the same order as that upon which thou standest. And the Lord said unto me, by the Urim and Thummim, that Kolob was after the manner of the Lord, according to its times and seasons in the revolutions thereof. That one revolution was a day unto the Lord, after his manner of reckoning, it being 1,000 years, according to the time appointed unto that whereon thou standest. This is the reckoning of the Lord's time, according to the reckoning of Kolob. And the Lord said unto me, The planet which is the lesser light, lesser than that which is to rule the day, even the night, is above or greater than that upon which thou standest in point of reckoning. For it moveth in order more slow. This is in order because it standeth above the earth upon which thou standest. Therefore the reckoning of its time is not so many as to its number of days, and of months, and of years. And the Lord said unto me, Now, Abraham, these two facts exist. Behold, thine eyes see it. It is given unto thee to know the times of reckoning, and the set time, yea, the set time of the earth upon which thou standest, and the set time of the greater light, which is set to rule the day, and the set time of the lesser light, which is set to rule the night. Now the set time of the lesser light is a longer time as to its reckoning than the reckoning of the time of the earth upon which thou standest. And where these two facts exist, there shall be another fact above them. That is, there shall be another planet whose reckoning of time shall be longer still. And thus there shall be the reckoning of the time of one planet above another, until thou come nigh unto Kolob, which Kolob is after the reckoning of the Lord's time, which Kolob is set nigh unto the throne of God, to govern all those planets which belong to the same order as that upon which thou standest. And it is given unto thee to know the set time of all the stars that are set to give light, until thou come near unto the throne of God. Thus I, Abraham, talked with the Lord face to face, as one man talketh with another. And he told me of the works which his hands had made. And he said unto me, my son, and his hand was stretched out. Behold, I will show you all these. And he put his hand upon mine eyes, and I saw those things which his hands had made, which were many, and they multiplied before mine eyes, and I could not see the end thereof. And he said unto me, This is Ex-Nihilo, which is the sun. And he said unto me, Kokab, which is star. And he said unto me, Olea, which is the moon. And he said unto me, Kokabium, which signifies stars, or all the great lights, which were in the firmament of heaven. And it was in the night time when the Lord spake these words unto me, I will multiply thee and thy seed after thee, like unto these. And if thou canst count the number of sands, so shall be the number of thy seeds. And the Lord said unto me, Abraham, I show these things unto thee before ye go into Egypt, that ye may declare all these words. If two things exist, and there be one above the other, there shall be greater things above them. Therefore Kolob is the greatest of all the Kokabium that thou hast seen, because it is nearest unto me. Now if there be two things, one above the other, and the moon be above the earth, then it may be that a planet or a star may exist above it, and there is nothing that the Lord thy God shall take in his heart to do, but what he will do it. Howbeit that he made the greater star, as also if there be two spirits, and one shall be more intelligent than the other, yet these two spirits, notwithstanding one is more intelligent than the other, have no beginning. They existed before. They shall have no end. They shall exist after, for they are nolam, or eternal. And the Lord said unto me, These two facts do exist, that there are two spirits, one being more intelligent than the other. There shall be another more intelligent than they. I am the Lord thy God. I am more intelligent than they all. The Lord thy God sent his angel to deliver thee from the hands of the priests of Elkanah. I dwell in the midst of them all. I now, therefore, have come down unto thee to declare unto thee the works which my hands have made, wherein my wisdom excelleth them all. For I rule in the heavens above, and in the earth beneath, in all wisdom and prudence, over all the intelligences thine eyes have seen from the beginning. I came down in the beginning in the midst of all the intelligences thou hast seen. Now the Lord had shown unto me, Abraham, the intelligences that were organized before the world was. And among all these there were many of the noble and great ones. And God saw these souls that they were good. And he stood in the midst of them, and he said, These I will make my rulers. For he stood among those that were spirits, and he saw that they were good. And he said unto me, Abraham, thou art one of them. Thou wast chosen before thou wast born. And there stood one among them that was like unto God. And he said unto those who were with him, We will go down, for there is space there. And we will take of these materials, and we will make an earth, whereon these may dwell. And we will prove them herewith, to see if they will do all things whatsoever the Lord their God shall command them. And they who keep their first estate shall be added upon. And they who keep not their first estate shall not have glory in the same kingdom with those who keep their first estate. And they who keep their second estate shall have glory added upon their heads forever and ever. And the Lord said, Whom shall I send? And one answered like unto the Son of Man, Here am I, send me. And another answered and said, Here am I, send me. And the Lord said, I will send the first. And the second was angry, and kept not his first estate. And at that day many followed after him.
Whoa! I know I say this every time we read these scriptures, how powerful they are. But they are just so, Joseph Smith once said about truth and light that it's delicious. He says it tastes delicious. This doctrine tastes delicious. He said something to that effect. Well, that's how this is to me. It tastes delicious. It is light and knowledge beyond anything I've ever experienced. I have a natural inclination to like science and things. And in fact, I even have something called the Larson Research Center, that is an online research center where I dabble in theoretical physics. But this is just amazing to me, that he talks about one thing being another, being above another. If two things exist, one greater than the other, then you can be sure that there's something further that is greater than them both. Well, you see, you never hear the critics of the Book of Abraham talk about this, but it's a fascinating thing. You see, the modern science is really in a quagmire about how things are supposed to work. You know, they know how to calculate a lot of things that are already matter, but to understand where matter came from is very, very difficult for them. And of course, when they found that it was made of atoms and light was made of corpuscles and things were moving all around, boy, it was really hard for them, because they had supposed that electrons that they saw coming out of matter, out of atoms, that they somehow were revolving around the what they called the nucleus of the atom, because when they poked in, they found that there was a very small center to atoms and a lot of space between them in the elements, for instance. And so they had this model they were trying to make, and in the early days it was the idea that the electron, you've seen pictures of it, was going all around the nucleus. But that presented them with a big problem, because that would mean that it was accelerating. An electron would have to, if it's changing its course, that by definition means that there's an acceleration involved, and if there's an acceleration involved, that means it would have to emit energy, and if that were the case, it would lose energy as it continued this acceleration, and eventually then it would spiral down into the nucleus. But it didn't. It just kept going. And so this is something that is was very enigmatic to them, and they had to change their mechanics into something that they called quantum mechanics, that was special for these very small pieces that were different for the aggregates of matter that we normally deal with, like a cannonball. A cannonball that was circulating around the Earth would eventually fall to the Earth, because of if it was ever to emit radiation like the electron does. Well, so anyway, the way they solved that was to eliminate really this principle that is talked about here in the Book of Abraham, where the Lord says that there is this order. Remember, we're always talking about order in church, and how the house of the Lord is a house of order. That's very, very important to Latter-day Saints, but it's not just the church, it's the whole world. There has to be order to the world, to the universe. And the Lord is giving us a very important principle. He's saying that we are eternal. And eternal things, if you take something, one is greater than the other, then you can be assured that there's something greater than that one. Or that there is something greater than those two. And see, modern science, quantum mechanics, has done away with that. They use something called complex numbers, and those complex numbers don't have a beginning or an end, because one is not greater than the other. So they have done away with this idea that you can find something, when you're talking about fundamentals, that there is an order, that one is greater than the other. And if two things exist and one greater than the other, then there's always going to be something greater than those two. And so anyway, we won't get into that much, but one of the biggest things, the reason that this is a bombshell, is that it's saying that man is eternal as well. Did you catch that? He says a lot of things about Kolob in this about, and the world mocks that and pretends that it's saying that that is heaven, and of course it's not. And then, of course, the names that are given to these things are mocked a lot by the world. But this idea that man is eternal and as well as God, that is just so iconoclastic to the world, you see, because they don't think that. They have something called Ex-Nihilo creation, which means the concept that God created us and everything in the world out of nothing. And so we see that that's not the case here, and so it really causes a problem with them. So we'll get more into that, but let's cover our situation update, our awful situation update first, and that comes to us from I think it's an Alex Jones. Here we go again. Alex Jones clip that's going to talk about the imminent collapse here that we're facing in the United States. So let's go to that, and then we'll come back to the book of Abraham and what's going on there.
Carl in Washington, you're on the air.
Hey, Alex.
I think I will.
I got a comment. Can you hear me?
I think I will pause that for a minute, and because it's there's some important visuals with this one, I will bring up and try to coordinate the video part of it with the audio so that you can see some of the headlines, because they're really instructive. And that's why I chose this particular video to our update today. I'll get it fairly close, probably not exact, but okay. So here they are, fairly coordinated, and let me then pull it up on the share so you can see it. Okay, so now here we go.
Yes, sir.
I got a comment, and then I got something I got to tell you.
Go ahead.
First comment, I don't understand what things as they're going. Almost any dummy can see what's going on, but I don't understand why, I'll say, the Tea Party, some of the conservative Republicans, we're going to lose it all, and there's nothing to stick around for if this happens. But these guys become more vocal and active, I don't understand.
I'll tell you why, because a bunch of leaders came on the scene and they taught people how to compromise. The problem is that and the globalists want authoritarianism now. They don't want prosperity, even though it creates incredible wealth. They want control. And the decision has been made to turn us into a third world nation, because the elite have put the police state in place so they can live in big armored compounds. And I guess the rest of us just are out here outside of it. It's a very evil, short-sighted outlook, but it's the way that every major empire has gone. And we don't repeat history because it's modern age. Things are more compressed now. Things happen quicker. So that means bad things can be worse, but they can also be better. There's a lot of wild cards involved. And, I mean, really, at the end of the day, the people running things are deviants. And by deviant, I mean the way the church teaches, you know, establishment church, if you like good looking, you're deviant. I mean, no, deviant is creating derivatives that screw the next generation and cheat everybody and destroy the economy. Deviance is creating GMO that sterilizes all the rats that eat it and feeding it to humans. You know, I mean, there's things on an order of scale that are billions of times more evil than what we're taught. You know, oh, not opening the door for a girl, that's evil. But, you know, creating, you know, all these weapons isn't. So, I mean, you're asking the question, what do you think? Because you're right. We're at the end of the day, basically, at the bottom of a cycle. And I think it's because a lot of the people that have money are so compartmentalized in their wealth that they don't see the effects of what they do. And they have such disdain for their fellow man and woman, they kind of like seeing people in bad straits. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to. I think it's part of evil growing. What do you think?
Well, I'm positive about the evil, but I just don't know how. So I don't understand part of it.
Well, you just hit the nail on the head. If you've studied history, elites never get out of their setting up right now. They tend to think with all the high-tech gadgetry and over-the-horizon predictive systems that they're going to get out of something. But if you get to the higher level elites, they go, oh, no, it's going to be a giant, disastrous black nightmare. And that's what we're looking for. To them, it's more of the adventure of the attempt to take over and to dominate good. You know, when you realize it's a death battle by evil against good, then it all makes sense. But it's not just choose good or evil. You've got to choose the right good. You see, that's the deception that defined the real thing and not the counterfeit. But it's a good question. I appreciate you, Carl. And hey, just be glad you care. You're even involved and want to fix it. Most people don't even know there's a big war going on. There's a war on, folks, for your mind, for your heart, for your soul, for your seed. Did you know it was happening?
Okay.
This is Alice Jones, InfoWarsLife.com. The latest in preparedness is...
Stop there. That's a really important, if general, description of what's happening. The battle for good and evil, and we see this now, this purpose as our mind expands through the book of Abraham. We see our really noble heritage that we were before, that existed before we came to this earth, and that we're always going to exist, but it depends on how much of the light in this world that we follow. We're going to see that let's see, I've lost my place here for a minute. Hold on, I think I'm looking at yesterday's notes that I made here, so it kind of got me a little confused. But nevertheless, you can see here, Alex Jones looks at the huge big picture. He sees humanity in this struggle, good against evil, and he sees the evil of the elites. I mean, they're in they are in cahoots, so to speak, in league with the devil. That's a very real thing to Alex Jones, and it's a very real thing to the used to be to the Christians, but a lot of them have apostatized and have gone over to the other side, and so they don't see that. But for the Mormons, at least, for those Latter-day Saints that are aware, they see this as well, but not as Alex Jones sees it, because that, in Alex Jones' mind, in his mind, this struggle against the evil is in a context without the plan of God. See, he doesn't see that that the Lord has a plan in all of it. I mean, if you listen to him, he will talk about God and how he believes in Jesus and how he believes in the Bible. But see, when he comes down to it, he doesn't really understand the Lord's plan, as we've been talking about it, and as it's been revealed, of course, in the Book of Mormon and by the voices from the dust. So that really makes it a difficult struggle. He sees this great darkness coming, and if the elite wins, he sees this horror that is ahead for mankind, this great period of darkness that is really been written about and described by these people. And of course, this is not the first time that they've tried to do these kinds of things, and so he knows just how evil their heart is and how little they care about the people that they think they're superior to. Of course, this all serves the purpose of Satan, and we can see it from our point of view as if we're standing up on a hill and we can see this great battle going on between the two forces. But if you don't understand the plan of God, his marvelous work and a wonder, and the fact that he has made it very clear that there shall be this great division before his coming, where the wicked are ruled by Satan, just as Alex Jones sees it. But what he doesn't see is also true, that the Lord will rule over his saints. That's the thing that they need to understand. And we've been trying to stress from the beginning that they need to understand that, because they can't be part of it unless they come unto him. And they can't come unto him unless they accept the fullness of the gospel, that he has sent the elders out to teach the world. He's flooded the world with the truth of God in the Book of Mormon, and he has established his church in their hearts. So if not, though, if they reject the truth, the Bible makes this clear as well, then they're going to believe the people will be swept up by a great deception, and they will be ruled over with an iron hand in this, I don't want to call it a kingdom, but dominion is what the scriptures call it, this dominion of Lucifer, this dominion of Satan, and it's not pretty. We can see elements of it in the scriptures. So at any rate, it's important to see, I think, how Alex Jones and others see this. There are some, like the Hagman and Hagman report that we've covered a lot, where, especially with their guests, that see things from the Christian, the creedal Christian point of view, but not from the Latter-day Saint point of view, which they reject altogether. And again, just like Alex Jones' vision, we've seen their vision being very dark, and they don't see much hope, because they know that the Christian world is divided, that the church has been overcome, that there's this great apostasy, that the main part of the church of Christ, the body of Christ they're talking about, as they refer to it, has been overcome by false doctrine, and as Brannon House said, they've elevated the flag above the cross, and they've lost sight of the fact of that the kingdom of God is a kingdom in heaven. See, they don't believe that the Lord will establish a kingdom of God on the earth among the Christians. They believe that it's only among the house of Israel, and that they don't understand how that's going to be, because they the scriptures that talk about that seem to be confusing to them, because they know that Israel would be saved, but they don't know how, unless it's on the principles of Jesus Christ. And they see that the Jews have rejected that, and they don't see how things are going to change. So their only hope is this idea of the rapture that's going to come and take them away before the world goes dark, before the lights go out, and they will be up in heaven, caught away from this misery. Well, of course, that's what we're trying to tell them, is that that's not going to happen. Well, anyway, one of the most controversial doctrines of the Mormons, and one of the reasons why they reject it so much, is the teaching that the living God did not create the world out of nothing in what is known as Ex-Nihilo creation. This, for the Mormons, though, matter can neither be created nor destroyed. We just read that in the book of Abraham. Only transformed. But this doctrine of a process that's ongoing, an eternal process that goes back to, we don't know. There has no beginning, and it will have no end. But how we can comprehend that is very, very difficult, unless we take out some example of a ring or something and say, see, if it had an end, it would, if it had a beginning, it would have an end. But because it doesn't have an end and it doesn't have a beginning, then it's eternal. But this doctrine was iconoclastic, to say the least, and it came out of Joseph Smith's mouth first. And the people saw that in the King Follett address, where he talked about some very important doctrine, and that's the doctrine that's most often quoted by the enemies of the church, by the anti-Zionists. But then in 1842, and I don't know what year the King Follett address was given, if that was before or after this date in 1842, when in the Times and Seasons the Book of Abraham was first published. But when people read that, they must have gone bananas, because it's totally different than the creedal Christian doctrine that God was the only one that lived forever, and he got bored with himself and decided that he didn't want to be lonely anymore, and so he created the worlds, and he created man. And then according to a lot of their doctrine, that is Calvinist doctrine, he decides who's going to be saved. Of his creatures, and who, so that he can make this clear to the world, this idea of good and evil to the world. And then the others that he has elected, that he will then save them, and they will dwell with him forever. It's a horrible doctrine, and yet that is the doctrine that these people, a lot of them, entertain even today, while they are pointing their fingers of scorn at the Mormons. But this doctrine of the Mormons, this glorious doctrine that we are co-eternal with the Father, didn't come out of nothing. It didn't come out of nowhere. Just as matter is not created out of nowhere. It comes from the Book of Abraham, or at least the same source from which the Book of Abraham comes. But this bombshell idea changes everything. Since according to Mormon doctrine, spirit and matter are combined, and spirit is only another form, a higher form of matter, it follows that we are eternal beings, co-eternal with God. We had no beginning, and we will have no end, as we have just read the Lord himself talking to Abraham and explaining it. And again, we want to point out parenthetically here, Joseph just doesn't tell us these things. He provides the first person dialogue from which it comes. In the first place, it's Abraham here, and then in the second place, it's God talking in the first place and the first person to Abraham. But again, so we find out here that we had no beginning and we will have no end. But the degree to which we choose to abide in the light of truth determines the state of our ultimate existence. This is something so appealing to me. And the majority, I'm sure, of the Latter-day Saints, maybe not to those who are departing from the faith so easily.
Excuse me,
but
Doug.
to those who know and have studied what the world has to offer, whether it be Alex Jones or the Calvinists, this is amazing. The degree to which we choose to abide in the light of truth determines the state of our ultimate existence. The work of the Father is to bring to pass the immortality and eternal life of man, of as many of men of us who are willing to follow the light. And that reminds us, of course, of Lehi's great sermon in the Book of Mormon, the voices from the dust crying out really the same thing, that there must be opposition in all things, because it's our choice of light and darkness that makes all things possible. Whoa, that is so deep, so amazing, and the world never even talks about it, but they will in centuries to come, because it's a hugely bright light that's shining in the darkness. And for me at least, I just glory that I know about it. Well, here we're learning more about what that is to choose. We're told that even though this doctrine is anathema to creedal Christianity, and the reason why they accuse the Mormons of heresy and seek to convince the world that the Latter-day Saints are not disciples of Jesus Christ, because Jesus Christ is, according to the Mormons, the brother of Satan, and that God created Jesus, and that God had a father, and his father had a father before him, and so this eternity goes back. And then they make fun of Kolob, and the idea they don't get into it. You notice they don't quote the Book of Abraham too much. They quote their caricatures of the Book of Abraham, and I think one of the reasons for this many times is because it makes so much sense when you quote it from the words of the Book of Abraham, that many people say, wait a minute, that sounds really good, I haven't heard it. But instead they make up these caricatures of it that they quote, and we see God coming down and knocking on the door of Mary, to have marital relations with her and bring forth the only begotten Son of God. And only they don't put it that way. See, they put it in these cartoonish caricature manners, and so it seems, and then of course they have the Book of Mormon musical, where they're also mocking the servants of the Lord who are delivering this message to the world. But so as a result of this, though, the Book of Abraham, maybe even more than the Book of Mormon, becomes the focus of the anti-Zionist attack, because it's so easily caricaturized, I guess. They know that if they can discredit the author of the Book of Abraham, that they can then destroy the credibility of the marvelous work and wonder itself, because of Joseph's claim that it was revealed, the Book of Mormon, the voices from the dust, was revealed to him in fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 29. Well, consequently, the attack then on the Book of Abraham is relentless and effective, and that's what we're going to try to discuss today on our program. The thing about it is that it's been a long battle, but most of it has been in the halls of the state of Utah, pretty much. It's also, among the Latter-day Saints, pretty much, because until the church starts to come on the world stage, the rest of the world really wasn't interested all that much in this. But now that it's things are getting down to the nitty-gritty, this is becoming quite a deal. I've got a clip here that I want to play of the anti-Zionists where they're showing this, and we'll go ahead and watch it because it shows both sides. Although it's very, very biased against the Latter-day Saints, I think it will be useful. So I will start it first, and on the audio.
And I, Abraham, had the Urim and Thummim which the Lord my God had given.
Oh, wait a minute. No, that's not it. This is it here. Let me get the audio.
Meet Kerry Muhlestein. Dr. Muhlestein is professor of ancient scripture at BYU and has a PhD.
Okay. And now I'll come over here again. Bear with me and start the video so you can see the things that they're putting up there. Let's see, I think I want to make it on screen. Oh, sorry, I hit the So I'll share that, the video part, coming up, there it is, I think, right there. Okay. Aggravating. Now it's black. Let me. Oh, I'm sorry. I got good. Now, the problem where the focus is. Oh, yeah. It shows the wrong. I really apologize. This is just crazy trying to make this work. I somehow hit the wrong one. Oh gosh, if we have any audience, we're going to lose them all. Because I can't. All right. So now we should have the video and the audio. And hopefully they'll be halfway synchronized here.
PhD in Egyptology from UCLA. He has recently made a series of videos defending the Mormon scripture, the Book of Abraham, from some common criticisms. In the first video, Kerry claims that the surviving papyri, recovered in the 1960s, were not part of the source used by Joseph Smith to produce the Book of Abraham.
He had two rolls, one of them a long roll, and that's the one that Joseph and others refer to as the source of the Book of Abraham. That roll was destroyed in the Chicago fire. And what we can document is that he had already mounted some under glass before people were saying that he's translating from the long roll. So the fragments that we have, they're not what others were saying and what Joseph Smith was saying he was translating from. Anyone who tells you that Joseph Smith is translating from the text around facsimile 1 on the small fragment that we have is just flying in the face of the historical accounts that tell us the source is the long scroll.
Kerry is making the assumption that all of the surviving fragments, including facsimile number 1, were not part of the long scroll, the sole source from which the Book of Abraham was translated. Carrie, did you forget that Joseph translated facsimile number 1? Did you forget that he published both that facsimile and the translation in the Times and Seasons newspaper? Did it slip your mind that the church has been publishing both the facsimile and Joseph's translation of it in their scriptures for over a century? Did you forget that the Book of Abraham directly references facsimile number 1? The book itself states that it was put at the beginning of the record so that the reader could refer to it as they were reading. It claims to be directly related to the scroll it was attached to. Did you forget all of this? No, you didn't.
If we are going to look at the closest parallels, they actually support what Joseph Smith is telling us, because he says that this scene is about Abraham being on an altar and then being protected by an angel from being sacrificed.
See, Carrie knows that facsimile number 1 is supposed to be the depiction of the story of the attempted murder of Abraham that's contained in the Book of Abraham. He knows that this facsimile was used by Joseph Smith in the translation process. He also knows that Joseph tried to translate the characters around it. Sometime after the initial translation started, Joseph, with the help of some others, tried to create an Egyptian alphabet and grammar using the scroll they had been translating from. Their working document, the Kirtland Egyptian Papers, has copies of many of the characters that are on the surviving papyrus that contain facsimile number 1, in the same order. Next to these characters was written what they thought these characters meant. Did you forget about that, Carrie?
It's clear that Joseph Smith and his colleagues were trying to create an alphabet and grammar of the Egyptian language, but they gave up after a while. As a translation he's received through inspiration, and then he's going to try and piece together how the grammar works. It's pretty clear he gives up on this very quickly. That's just a guess. None of us really know.
No. See, Carrie knows that Joseph attempted to find a correlation between the text of the Book of Abraham and the surviving fragments. The fact that they tried to use the characters on the surviving papyrus to recreate the Egyptian grammar is pretty good evidence that it was part of the source used to produce the Book of Abraham. So, even though Carrie knows these facts, he failed to mention them. This makes me wonder, why is Carrie willing to stretch the truth and omit relevant information in an attempt to divorce the existing papyri from the Book of Abraham? Why is he trying so hard to separate the two?
In this particular lion couch scene, we call it a lion couch scene where Abraham is on this altar. If he's going to be pulled up to be resurrected, he usually will have one arm out. In this case, Abraham has two hands out. It looks like a struggle. I don't know what else you would be doing if you have your hands up like this, if you're not struggling. It's not welcoming something, it's trying to push something away.
Carrie, you do know that those arms were drawn in by a little kid, I mean by someone, in the 19th century, right? That they were not part of the original facsimile? Notice how the upper hand has dots on it, just like the bird to the right does. Notice how it resembles that bird's wingtip more closely than the fingers on the hand right below it. That is because the 19th century restoration of the missing bits is wrong. According to non-LDS Egyptologists, a proper restoration would have had the bird figure, representing Isis, above the figure on the table, with the jackal-headed god Anubis standing at the foot of the table, not a priest with a knife.
His leg is out, indicating that he's moving. So you have Abraham's legs out and moving, and you have a priest in between them. This doesn't indicate someone being mummified. It doesn't indicate someone being resurrected. This indicates movement, and it's hard for me to imagine it's any kind of a movement except for a struggle, an attempt to get off the altar.
Hey, looky here. Other lion couch resurrection scenes where their leg is out and they have a hand up. Maybe there is another way to interpret this scene other than a struggle. Maybe this is depicting the resurrection of Osiris or something.
If he's trying to get on the altar, why would the priest be there?
Are you really taking the position that that figure on the left is the idolatrous priest of Elkanah? Really? What kind of an Egyptologist are you that you cannot immediately identify that this figure should be the jackal-headed god Anubis? What kind of a scholar are you if you think that there was an ancient Egyptian god named Elkanah? There is no evidence of a god with that Hebrew name ever existing in Egyptian mythology.
I find it fascinating that so many people will say that Facsimile 1 is a standard drawing associated with the Book of Breathings, which is the text that's around Facsimile 1. And they'll say that's the standard drawing with the Book of Breathings.
Would those other people be Egyptologists, non-Mormon Egyptologists, who don't have a preconceived belief system that they are trying to defend? Carrie admits that the text surrounding Facsimile number 1 is the Book of Breathings. He is also admitting that his peers consider the papyrus to simply be part of the Book of the Dead, nothing more than a common funerary text. Why is this? Because there's no reason to think that it is anything else. If the Book of Abraham had never existed, and it had been you, Carrie, who had discovered these papyri, I have no doubt that you would have come to the same conclusions that your peers have.
Let me tell you one of the more fascinating things that we've found. We've found that the ancient Egyptians themselves have associated Abraham with this kind of scene. We have a drawing of a person on a lion couch, the kind of altar that Abraham's on in facsimile 1. But they say specifically that the person on this couch is Abraham.
Well, it's just too bad it wasn't on the papyrus containing facsimile number 1 then, wasn't it? After looking up this image, and all of the references to it I could find in the time I had, I could not find anything that confirms Carrie's claim that this papyrus specifically states that it is Abraham lying on the couch. In fact, it looks very similar to other mummification scenes with Anubis. It sure does not look like a struggle between Abraham and a priest who is trying to kill him. However, I think that this is a very interesting point for Carrie to make. In a paper that was published in the BYU publication The Religious Educator, Carrie wrote that it was common for the text and its accompanying picture to be separated from each other, for the wrong vignette to be associated with the text, and for vignettes and text to be completely misaligned on a long scroll. Frequently there is a mismatch between the content of a vignette and the content of the text. This is the same argument that Carrie was trying to make earlier about facsimile number 1. On the one hand, Carrie is claiming that we should not expect the text and the facsimile to be related. On the other, he is saying that having the name Abraham on the same papyrus as a lion couch scene is a direct reference to the person in that scene. He is contradicting himself. Carrie, why don't you interpret facsimile number 1 based on the text surrounding it like you do with this one? Why do you have a different standard for interpreting these sources? Is it because the one supports your preconceived belief system and the other one doesn't?
Joseph Smith ties the crocodile that's below the altar in with Pharaoh. And the interesting thing is that just during Abraham's day, a very strong association between the king of Egypt, or Pharaoh, and the crocodile starts to grow. And so Joseph Smith hits that one just head on.
I'm surprised that Carrie would go here. Just like the Chaldeans, who did not exist until over 1,000 years after Abraham, the term Pharaoh is an anachronism in the Book of Abraham. It was not used as a title for a king until the middle of the 18th dynasty, which was several hundred years after the time of Abraham. While the cult of Sobek, the crocodile god, was starting to form in Abraham's day, I don't see how there could have been a strong connection between the two when there was no Pharaoh, king of Egypt. So while there was a crocodile god, I would hardly describe Joseph Smith's translation as being head-on correct.
Another fascinating thing about facsimile 2 is it has 4 figures on it that Joseph Smith says represent the 4 quarters of the earth. Those 4 figures, as Egyptologists, we typically identify them as the 4 sons of Horus. But as we've done research, we've come to realize that the 4 sons of Horus are actually each one assigned a cardinal direction. They're associated with the 4 cardinal points of the earth. So Joseph Smith hit that one, just nailed it.
The 4 sons of Horus are in both facsimile number 1 and 2. In the first, Joseph Smith completely misidentifies the canopic jars, representing the 4 sons of Horus, as idolatrous gods of Elkanah, Libnah, Makra, and Horus. There were never any Egyptian gods with those names. While the 4 sons of Horus sometimes associated with the directions of a compass, this is not the same thing as the ambiguous 4 quarters of the earth. Directions are not the same as regions.
We find it with little phrases like kolob. That root in many Semitic languages, keleb, is associated with center or being in the middle. And so Joseph Smith gets this one just right again.
Let's look at the definition Joseph gave for what he thought was the Egyptian word kolob, signifying the first creation, nearest to the celestial or residence of God, first in government, the last pertaining to the measurement of time, the measurement according to the celestial time, which time signifies 1 day to a cubit. 1 day in kolob is equal to 1,000 years according to the measurement of this earth, which is called by the Egyptians Jahoeth. Is a similar sounding but different word from a different language that meant something completely different. Evidence that Joseph Smith got it just right again?
3 times in a row, dead center, Joseph Smith hits a bullseye.
I'm amazed that Carrie was able to say this with a straight face. But let's see how accurate his bullseyes are. Joseph translated 12 characters on the first facsimile. According to Egyptologists, he got none of them right. The names are wrong, the scene is wrong, the symbols are wrong, and he names gods that were not part of the Egyptian belief system. Joseph translated 11 figures on the second facsimile. Again, Egyptologists say that none of the names are correct, and Joseph misidentifies every god in that facsimile. In an apparent attempt To restore the missing segments, inverted hieratic characters were copied from lines 2, 3, and 4 of the Joseph Smith Papyrus 11. And if you think that the sun and the stars borrow their light from the revolutions of Kolob through the interstellar medium of Kerry Van Rash instead of from internal nuclear fusion, please get some help. Joseph translated 6 figures from the last facsimile, and according to Egyptology, none of the figures represented who Joseph said they were, and the scene has nothing to do with the teaching of astronomy.
Facsimile 3 is very similar to a very common Egyptian scene where someone is presented before Osiris on his throne.
Joseph misidentifies Osiris as Abraham. Isis is the pharaoh, Mad is a prince of the pharaoh, Anubis is a slave, and Hor is a waiter. The character above that figure's hand say that it is Osiris Hor, justified forever, not Shulam. Nothing in any of these facsimiles is correct. None of the translations that Joseph provided has been accepted by the scientific community, turned out to be accurate, or enhanced our understanding of the science of Egyptology. But this doesn't stop Carey. In his videos, he continually makes definitive statements about how new findings in Egyptology are proving links between the rituals of the ancient Egyptians and Abraham.
As we've looked at these kinds of scenes in an Egyptian setting, we find the Egyptians substituting Abraham for Osiris and saying that it's Abraham, sometimes Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but Abraham that is sitting on the throne. Facsimile 2 is the kind of drawing that in Egyptology we call a hypocephalus. One of the things that we've found with this is that, again, the ancient Egyptians associated that kind of drawing with Abraham. For all 3 of the facsimiles that Joseph Smith associates with Abraham, we find that the Egyptians themselves are also associating them with Abraham. So the ancient Egyptians themselves associate Abraham with this kind of scene. They call it a wedged eye. They say that Abraham is a pupil of the wedged eye, and so they themselves associate this with Abraham.
After lots of searching, I was unable to find any non-LDS sources that even hinted at any of the connections or parallels that Carey was asserting. Since I am not an Egyptologist, I decided to contact some professional Egyptologists, including 3 professors of Egyptology at UCLA, to see what they had to say. I told them about the claims of Professor Muhlestein, gave them links to his first 3 videos, and asked them if he was accurate. Dr. Dieleman responded and told me that while he did not have time to view Carey's videos, he was familiar with the controversy. He said that I should consult Robert Rittner's book, The Joseph Smith Egyptian Papyri, and that he shared Dr. Rittner's views on the subject. 2 other professors of Egyptology also recommended Rittner's book, citing him as an expert on the subject. While I don't have $90 to spend on that book right now, Rittner has appeared in a documentary about the Book of Abraham, where he shared his views.
What this document really is an extended prayer on behalf of a deceased Egyptian priest, which begins with an addition to God of mummification, probably. Certainly the picture of the God of mummification to ensure his continued existence, to ensure the priest's continued existence in the next world. And then it's followed up by a series of statements where, O deified Horus, may you walk as you had done in life. May your ears function, may your eyes function, may the gods receive you. Long series of invocations on this, essentially ensuring that this dead priest is able to function in death as he had in life, but now as part of a company of the ancient Egyptian gods. Abraham is not mentioned once. There's certainly no reason that this particular Book of Breathing scroll should be expanded much beyond the surviving length. I've now read the entire document from the beginning to the end and made out what one could make out on the poor copy of the final vignette. The most that is missing from this text is simply 2 columns worth of Egyptian hieratic and possibly a small vignette. But other than that, there would be nothing more that would inflate its length much beyond its current size. It is both unprecedented and unreasonable to assume that an intrusive text about a completely different matter, a narrative history of Abraham and his descendants, would have been inserted into a document whose beginning, middle, and end is devoted specifically to the resurrection of an Egyptian priest. It would disrupt the document. It would have nothing to do with its content. It would be unprecedented, and no other document would have such a thing. And the narrative style of the Book of Abraham does not correspond to Egyptian verbiage. It's not the kind of thing Egyptians would say. They wouldn't say it in that way. And it certainly would never appear in such a context as this. It couldn't possibly be more out of place.
Explanations of each of the facsimiles accord with present understanding of Egyptian religious practices?
I want to be absolutely clear on this. There simply is no justification for the kind of interpretations that appear in Facsimile 1 or Facsimile 3. They are wrong with regard to the hieroglyphs, they are wrong with regard to the gender, they are wrong with regard to the understanding of what the scene actually represents, and where they are used in the body of the text, they are wrong there as well. In short, there is no historical validity to the interpretation in that book. None whatsoever.
Dr. Wendrich responded that the translation and interpretation of the Joseph Smith documents are a religious rather than a scholarly endeavor, and as such she respected them. I replied to the professor that while I appreciated her religious sensitivities, that Dr. Muhlestein was claiming that the science of Egyptology was proving his religious conclusions and using his PhD from UCLA to give his claims validity. Dr. Wendrich wrote me back, apparently now having watched at least one of Carrie's videos, and told me I was right and that she would discuss the matter with Carrie. The last professor to respond to me was Professor Kara Cooney. I didn't realize this at the time, but she's kind of famous. She starred in her own Discovery Channel series called Out of Egypt, and she's been on the Craig Ferguson show a few times.
Welcome, tall woman! Come, sit!
She sent me the following email. I watched the 3 videos, and I don't agree with any of it. The ancient Egyptians had no concept of Abraham, so I don't know where he gets these comparisons. And no, most Egyptologists do not agree, despite what Carrie says. I know Carrie, but I do not have much respect for his work. Now I have even less. The fact that he is digging in Egypt is even more worrisome. His PhD was awarded before I arrived at UCLA, although I know that Carrie finished his text-based dissertation after only 2 years of Egyptian language training, which is rather laughable. Carrie is just spinning out the same Mormon rhetoric. What is different is Mormons are funding PhDs in Egyptology and biblical studies, and then funding positions at BYU and elsewhere and passing these people off as experts, when they are only ideologically driven researchers, not experts interested in actual evidence. Thanks for sending. It's important to know who these people are. I am very thankful to all 3 for taking the time to respond to me. I really appreciate it. But this is why peer review is so vital in science. It keeps us honest. It prevents us from making unjustified claims and falling prey to confirmation bias. It forces us to support and defend a position with reason and evidence. If we can do that convincingly.
Okay, that's enough. Problems. Let me try to get that off of there. Okay. This is a pretty good of the controversy, and very good. People might even wonder, well, Doug, why are you playing that? It doesn't show, doesn't look like the Mormons are coming off very well in this controversy. And this all has been renewed, of course, by the most recent essay that the church has put out regarding it, and they're trying to say the same thing that the Mormons have, some of the Mormons have always tried to say, that there's not enough evidence to say that Joseph Smith is contending even that what we have in the text of Abraham came from these papyri that they are now so sure contains nothing about Abraham. We don't know how many he had. We don't know if there was any duplications. We know that he was going through a great deal of trouble at the time. He spent, in his diary that we read, it was in the fall and winter of 1835, but the book of Abraham wasn't published until 7 years later in 1842. And in the meantime, Joseph went through all kinds of excruciating experiences, including the apostasy of those who supposedly were trying to make out the Egyptian grammar. And according to Hugh Nibley, at least his point of view is that these people were trying to prove, and it sure fits with the controversy that was going on among them at the time, that they were trying to prove that they could do just as well as Joseph. he may have begun the effort to show them and to attempt himself at understanding how, because it's clear he didn't have an understanding of those hieroglyphics, and he might have been involved in their early attempt to make a grammar for them, is true, but that was very, very early on. After all their troubles that they went through, and especially that he went through there in Kirtland, and then moving to Zion and Missouri, and then being thrown in jail, and then coming out of that prison and taking over the swamp of Commerce, Illinois, and turning it into Nauvoo. And in the middle of that, then he publishes this Book of Abraham. Well, man alive, we're really jumping to a lot of conclusions to take what went on in the early days after they bought those artifacts and started in on assessing them and trying to understand them and so on, clear to the time when they were the Book of Abraham was published in 1842. That's a huge jump. And so what the Latter-day Saints have assumed, along with the enemies of the church, is that what they found in 1867 was the important piece. And so, but we don't know if that was a duplicate, that they had another one somewhere that was similar to that, because as they say, those appear all over the place in these Book of Breathings. Well, of course, Hugh Nibley, I was with him at Brigham Young University when all this was going on, and I went to his office one day with some pictures of petroglyphs that they had found, and in my naivete, I'd only been a member of the church just a few short years. I didn't realize what was going on with all these issues. So I went up to his office and he let me in. And he had photographs of these manuscripts, great big, highly high quality, large photographs with a lot of detail. I'm trying to think of large resolution, high resolution photographs. And they were all over the floor of his office. He had them placed, and there's hardly any room to walk. I had to step where he showed me. And so then, of course, he dismissed those petroglyphs as being nothing. But in the meantime, he talked to me a little bit about his work, which was to come out later. And it was called the Book of Abraham, an Egyptian Endowment, with a question mark. And so he himself worked hard to figure out what this was, and what he found that it was, and he makes the point that it was the Latter-day Saints, after this came out in 1967 and there was such a big furor over it, it was the Latter-day Saints that kept asking, what does the thing say? What is it? And if Joseph Smith was wrong, what is it that it says? And of course, they don't ask that question even today. They're only interested in one thing, to show that Joseph Smith didn't know what he was talking about, so that then that can be thrown out. The Book of Abraham can be thrown out and disregarded, and all its iconoclastic implications disregarded. And also then the great implication comes to the front that Joseph Smith was a fraud, that he wasn't a prophet, that the Book of Mormon is not the voices from the dust in fulfillment of Isaiah 29. It is not the great and marvelous work of the Lord, and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is a fraud. And they've been very successful at that, and many, many, many people have left the church because they could not come up with any kind of an answer to this. And then when people do try to come up with an answer, like this Carrie whatever his name is, Carrie M, I'll call him because I don't have his name in front of me to read, but Professor Carrie M, and he starts coming up with some of the explanations to make it, to force this piece of papyri to be the source of the Book of Abraham. And obviously it can't be. So the question is, and the thing for the Latter-day Saints to ask themselves is this: if that papyrus, or that fragment of papyrus is not the source of the Book of Abraham, what is the source? What was the source? And that's really what the church's essay is saying. The source, we don't know how, whether it was a trigger, whether after trying really hard to make sense of the papyrus that he had, Joseph went to the Lord in solemn prayer. Meantime, he's fighting off all the apostates, and the great, they tar and feather him, and he's receiving revelations about Zion, and he's dealing with the problems of those people who went with Oliver Cowdery and Parley P. Pratt down to Zion in Missouri there, and all the problems they're having, and the trips that they have to make down there, and so on. So he has to deal with so many difficulties as people are coming in and becoming part of the Latter-day Saint movement, and at the same time he is dealing with peepstones that people are coming up with false revelations, and he's dealing with people who do not understand the gospel of Jesus Christ and what it means, but jump to conclusions and seek to influence others. I mean, it is incredible what is happening in these 7 years between the fall and winter of 1835 and I can't remember the month in which the Times and Seasons publishes the Book of Abraham in 1842. So what we have to then come away with on this is that this assumption, both on the part of the Latter-day Saints and the part of the anti-Zionists, is wrong. Evidently, it's not the end of the world to say that this is not, obviously this cannot be the source of the Book of Abraham. So although the anti-Zionists will not allow people to get off the hook that easy after so many years of insisting that it must be, even Hugh that came out eventually, and I have a copy upstairs, concludes that this has nothing to do with the Book of Abraham. It has to do with some good news of the Latter-day Saints, though, and he shows how it's sort of a crude notebook for the Book of the Dead, and then he starts in his book talking about what the Book of the Dead was all about, and showing how this papyrus, this fragment of papyrus that the Latter-day Saints have now in their possession relates to the Book of the Dead, and the Book of the Dead relates to the endowment. And it's amazing as you go through there, the parallels, what they were trying to do. They had a knowledge of some things that went on in the endowment, but of course they didn't have the priesthood, and they were trying to replicate those things without the priesthood. So for this lady to say that they knew nothing of Abraham, that there was no intercourse between the Egyptians and Abraham, no knowledge of them, is just ludicrous. And I found in my own little bit of research that the Chaldeans of today, there's settlements of Chaldeans today in Detroit first, and then in Los Angeles and other places of the United States. And the thing that they're trying to stress to the world, that they are not Babylonians. The reason they say that people mix up Ur of the Chaldea, land of Chaldeans, that was down there in southern Mesopotamia, south of Babylon, that people think Abraham refers to in the Book of Abraham, is not actually it at all. It's Ur that's in the northern Mesopotamia, not far from Haran, where Abraham stopped when he and Lot started their journey towards Canaan. And and then eventually became divided, and where his father died, that is actually north of Canaan, not east. So we see them making this point today, but they know nothing of the Book of Abraham. They're not Latter-day Saints trying to make a connection between Egyptians and Abraham, which you just saw in the video. Modern Egyptologists totally deny and ridicule that there was ever any kind of an idea. And see, that's where they get the idea that all of this is anachronism. That because the Chaldeans didn't arrive down there in southern Mesopotamia for many, many centuries after Abraham, see, but their land, the land of Chaldeans, was up north of Canaan, up in what is northwestern Syria today, or northeastern Syria today, or southeastern Turkey, right around in that area. There is where the Chaldeans were. Well, I came across the book from way out of Google, way long ago. I can't remember exact date. And this guy's describing his journeys among the Chaldeans, and I haven't had a chance yet, but he talks about a bedstead. I wanted to see if by any chance that there's some reference to Egyptians in those days, but they were definitely in the time frame of Abraham. So if Egypt's influence, which is really difficult to think of in terms of south of Babylon, that they were ever a king in Babylon offering sacrifices, human sacrifices south of Babylon, with their priests there and everything, that is totally ludicrous. But again, it's been the assumption. And it looks like it's much more likely, though, that the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh of Egypt, and that's not mentioned in the video here, but even it's how the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing in the case of these anti-Zionists, because Joseph mentions this using the term Pharaoh and his priests, and the priests that he names there, or the idolatrous gods that he names. But he gets that idea, some of the anti-Zionists are saying, because Josephus said that that was the case, that the Pharaoh was in Ur. I don't know if he uses the city's name Ur, but that Abraham taught the king of Pharaoh. We'll read that tomorrow. We're out of time now, but I'll bring that up, and we'll find where Josephus Flavius himself speaks about this idea of Abraham teaching the things of the Chaldeans. See, because even today, these modern Chaldeans are trying to make it very, very clear that the Chaldeans weren't a political empire. They were the scientists of their day. They were the astrologers of their day. They were the mathematicians of their day. And that's exactly what we find in the book of Abraham, and confirmed in the book of Josephus. Although Joseph did have access to the book of Josephus, and it may be that that had an influence on him as well. But you see, they don't. The anti-Zionists would have to take on too much in order to do that, so they leave that part out. But we'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow as we continue our discussion of what a bombshell the book of Abraham is to the creedal Christian world, and as we see now, even the scientific world. So I'm grateful for everybody to have been with us today. Hope you have a good day, and my prayer, as always, is that the Lord's choicest blessings will be with us all in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.